Today's class was about Persia and the Mongols, and it corresponds with pages 165 to 167. And hopefully after the last couple days, you have a good, broad, basic understanding of the Mongols, and we'll slap some detail on the next couple of days here. But before we got into anything historical, I asked two questions that seem a little bit out of left field, but they're certainly simpler than the story of Persia and the Mongols. And the first question I posed to the class was, how do we divide ourselves up here at school? And we came up with the following list, and some are fairly obvious. We have a math department, science, social studies, English, foreign language, electives, maintenance, food service, busing, and administration. That was fairly easy. I mean, anybody could do that. But then the next question was a little deeper, and I asked, why do we divide ourselves up? What's the rationale for doing so? And this is a little more involved. So what people came up with was, number one, size. An organization of our size, it's very difficult for one person to run things. Expertise. Me teaching social studies, I'll have a better result than me teaching math. I could probably hang with the maintenance department and repair stuff. I don't think I'd be much of a bus driver. So people are good at certain things. Let them do what they're good at. Accountability, when you divide up an organization or a country or whatever into parts, it allows somebody to check to see if they're doing the right things. Now, part of our discussion in class is leadership. This requires good leadership. Do we have good leaders who are engaged in the oversight and the accountability, keeping people in check, keeping the organization flowing? And I think it's safe to say, whether it's a school or whether it's a nation or wherever you are in history or whenever you are in history, some leaders are better than others. And different variables create different challenges. Okay, so after we talked about this for a while, more of the philosophical underpinnings, I asked you to connect this train of thought with these two maps. Okay, map number one. You can see the Mongol Empire is massive, massive, and for one individual to keep control of this is virtually impossible just by sheer geography. And we're seeing these sections happening within the Mongol Empire. And this map is a little more clear. We can see these four areas, okay? The Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai, and the Khanate of the Great Khan. And we see four distinct areas. Now, the obvious parallel from that last discussion is math, science, English, social studies. Okay, we divide things up. Now, this was based for several reasons, and the legacy that the Mongols had in each of these four areas were a little bit different. And this was the focus today. Persia, or the Ilkhanate part of the Mongol Empire, and what happened. Okay, so I think a couple things you can take away. You're stronger united than divided. However, division naturally occurs when you're dealing with a large anything, but there's challenges. Okay, so anyway, to the history now. Finally, to the history. Before moving on, when you hear the word Persian, what comes to mind? And I posed this question to the class. Persian, what does it mean? Some people have this Hollywood version of 300 when they fought the Persians. By the way, Persian people were absolutely like beside themselves of 300's portrayal of Xerxes. I mean, the way they portrayed him was very comic booky. And, you know, he's a hero to Persian people. It would almost be making George Washington cartoony to an American. So you might have Hollywood, as you know, people know Persian rugs, very pretty, very beautiful. Persian cats. I'm not a cat guy, but some people like cats. You might think Persian language, which you call Farsi, or Persian art, which is very, very cool if you're into geometry in particular. So here's the egghead definition. Persia is a historic region of Southwest Asia associated with the area that is now modern Iran. The term Persia was used for centuries and originated from a region of southern Iran known as Persis, alternatively as Pars, Parsa, Fars, okay, the language Farsi, okay. The use of the name was gradually extended by the ancient Greeks and other peoples to apply to the entire Iranian plateau. So in a sense, it's a geographic region, and it's an old term for this region. Okay, so here's the story specific to the Mongols and the Persians. Okay, so I think we're going to start with Hilogi. Okay, and I had to check this, even though it looks like Huligu, but according to the book, Hilugi. If I mispronounce it, I do the best I can. This was Genghis Khan's grandson, and he led the second assault of Persia. His grandfather led the first, and he became the first Khan of Persia. Now, it was super destructive what he did to the people. His destruction of Baghdad left 200,000 plus dead, so they did not mess around. And in this destruction, very established Persian agriculture and infrastructure got destroyed as well. However, alcohol production did go up. Mongols did like alcohol. Islamic people do not like alcohol. It is against the rules to drink alcohol. But anyway, that's a little aside. Of course, the book throws that in there, okay? So the next person is Hanan Khan. Hanan Khan. The G is silent. So during his reign, he attempted to repair the damage from the past conquest. And he utilized Persian bureaucracy. And this is the point I want to pause. Cultural diffusion once again. And I do feel this in my heart of hearts. No matter where you are in history, when you are in history, intelligent people look around at the people around them and steal their good ideas, copy their good ideas, or see a pre-existing sort of idea and adding to it to make it even better. This is what great leaders do, and I would argue intelligent people do. So Hanan Khan saw the Persians were really good at bureaucracy and government. The Mongols weren't. And he started saying, okay, I'm going to start utilizing this and trying to repair some of this. Now, here is the game changer of history. This is the main point. I put it in red. Now, for the Mongols in this part, now I'm going to go back to this map here. You can see very far away from their homeland here in Mongolia. They're a long ways from home. It's not, especially in these days, it's not easy. You can't just get on a plane or a train to go home. They're very, very far away. And in time, what happened is they converted to Islam and they assimilated into Persia. And what we see today in the regions of the world, you know, the Stans, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, you see this merging of Mongol and Persian diffusion which exists today. And to this day, the region is still Islamic. Okay, now compared to the other three, they had a different story, but this one was one of assimilation and one of conversion. Now, eventually, Timor Khan, one of the fiercest and most successful conquerors, did come by and ruled Persia for a while, but he spread himself thin. I mean, he was fighting for almost 4 decades. And eventually, when Timor fades away, there is a little bit of a vacuum that gets filled with the Safavid Empire. Now, the Safavid Empire will grow out of this region. Now, Timur's ancestors will go on to form the Mughal Empire, and eventually, as a story for another day, the Safavid, Mughal, and Ottoman will go on to form 3 gunpowder empires that are hugely influential in the way the world is today, but that's for another day. I'm not going to cover that today, but by springtime, you'll know quite a bit about the Safavid, Mughal, and Ottoman empires. And final slide, hopefully you can come away from this if you were absent or if you're watching this just to refresh what we learned in class today. Number 1, the Mongols were massive and their size resulted in 4 distinctive portions. Now, these divisions are natural when dealing with a large entity like an empire. However, there are challenges associated with division. Keeping cohesion is difficult, requires strong leadership and bureaucracy. The Mongols weren't stellar in bureaucracy. They were stellar in warfare, not keeping it flowing. Now, the Ilkhanate, or the Persian portion of the Mongol Empire, was very destructive to the region initially. I mean, it took a lot out of the Persians because the Mongols were not messing around when they got there. But eventually, the Mongols, given enough time in the region, assimilated into the region, converted to Islam, and holds true for the region in modern times. And eventually, these 3 Islamic gunpowder empires will ascend, the Safavid, Ottoman, and Mughal, and they will establish the foundation of the modern Middle East and Islamic portions of the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. But that is for another day. All right, so hopefully you understand this story, and we'll go into a little more detail of the Mongols over the next couple of days. So thank you for watching.